Hello, and welcome to the Amongst Romans podcast, your window to everything Italy from an outsider's perspective. Join us each week as we navigate the Italian way of life and all the adventures that come along with it. A lot of people coming to Italy are searching for that culinary experience and they want to experience the food. So if you're one of those people, you are in luck because today I have a special guest that is your go-to person for everything Italian food in Italy. I'd like to introduce you to Tina Prestia from Tina's Table. Tina, welcome to the show. Why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners and how did you end up in Italy?
Hi there. Thank you for having me. I've been in Italy for 10 years now. We came for a year adventure and here we are 10 years later and we're staying. I became one of those people that I used to read about when I obsessed about living here.
And where did you move from?
I'm from New York and I met my husband in New York, but we were living in Nashville for 6 years due to his work.
So what brought you to Italy? What brought you guys to make that move and say, we're going to live there?
We have always had the idea of living abroad at some point in our lives as an adventure, more of an experience to learn about another culture. And we had a life is short moment. We lost a young friend to cancer. And it was like, we could think about this for the future, but we might not have knees. We might not be able to walk. We could have a health problem. Our daughter was turning 4 at the time and wasn't in school yet. So we figured we'd had that 1 year before she started kindergarten to do it. So we're just like, let's go. We weren't going to stay in Nashville forever. It just wasn't going to be our forever place. So we decided to make the change and do it then. And then it quickly turned into 2 years. Within 6 months, we're like, we'll just stay 2 years. You can do kindergarten here. And then I got sick and treatment took years. And then basically we started making up reasons to stay. The conversation probably for a year was like, are we staying? Are we going back? And we had our pro and con lists and everything. So it just happened.
Now looking back, it was like a no-brainer, right? Let's go and let's move. That's kind of what we did too. We were contemplating it for a long time and finally we just did it. Now looking back, I'm thinking we should have done it sooner.
I have no regrets. I have dual citizenship because my father was born here. So that was great. And my daughter had it. And now my husband finally does too. So, we don't have to deal with state permits anymore and things like that. So that helps a lot.
That makes things a lot easier.
And I still have family here because it's my father. I'm not generations ago. I recommend visiting if you're an Italian American or Canadian. Meeting family members is a unique and phenomenal experience. Like, okay, we have the same eyes or random things that you do that's the same and you haven't even met each other. It's a fascinating experience.
So Tina, you live in Bologna now. Did you originally come to Bologna or did you live somewhere else before you guys located there?
No, we chose Bologna because that Emilia-Romagna, the region that Bologna is in, is a wealthy region. So we knew if we needed the resources that a wealthier city is going to have, it was a good place to be in terms of schools, hospitals, work, all those kinds of things. And who knew that I would need the hospitals? I'm quite familiar with them now. They're very good at Bologna. So it's a good central part as well because it's on all of the speed trains. Every single speed train that goes from the top of Italy down to the south stops in Bologna. So the transport was also a good way for us to, since we were only going to be here a year, we knew we were going to be hopping all over the place. So yeah, it was a good location. And the other reason was a culinary reason because I wanted to learn how to roll pasta by hand instead of with a pasta machine. And that's the specialty of this region.
So tell us about what Tina's Table is about.
It is a blog. It used to be a personal chef service. When I was in the States, I kept the name because I already had the website. So I used to be a personal chef and I turned it into a blog a couple of years into our time here. And I write about traditional Italian food. I'm not doing Italian American food or Americanized Italian food. I'm trying to share traditional Italian food because I think it's delicious and doesn't need to be modified. It doesn't need to be switched around. I'm trying to write about Italian food as Italians write about their own cuisine. I go into a lot of geeky history and what the traditions are. But I always give flexibility and substitutions because you can't always get the traditional ingredients. I'm trying to write about it in the detail that it would be in Italian, giving it the respect that an Italian would give it. So I'm not It's not about, oh, here's a good recipe for dinner, as much as trying to preserve the traditions and share how delicious it is. It's good as it is. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I also have an emphasis on technique. So people who have never made the things before will have a good result.
I love that you teach people about traditional food because for people like us from North America, we are so used to the North American version of Italian food that has been modified and changed over the years. A lot of people who come to Italy expect to see those dishes, fettuccine alfredo or the spaghetti with meatballs, and they just don't have that here. And I think for a lot of people, that is very surprising. And they just don't realize how diverse Italian food is, even pasta. Before I came to Italy, I didn't realize just how many different types of pasta there are, how many different shapes, and what pasta goes with different sauce, and why you should use that one. So I thought, wow, that is such an interesting experience. We know about pasta being part of Italian culture, but we just don't know how integrated it is in the culture and how meaningful it is.
Yeah. I know a lot about the cuisine. I've been obsessing over it for 25 years, 30 years at this point, but I'm still just, I know I'm never going to learn it all, I mean, because the cuisine is so diverse, even within one region, within one province, even in the province, there are dishes an hour away from Bologna that they've never heard of before in other areas of this region.
Let's talk about why pasta and what makes pasta such an integral part of Italian culture. And what do you think people should know about pasta when they're coming to Italy?
Well, as we've mentioned, it's pretty diverse. So even things like ziti, which is everywhere in the United States, you can go to any supermarket and get a box of ziti. I can't find it very easily in Bologna. So if I want to make what in America would be baked ziti, the recipe in Italian was like ziti al forno alla sorrentina or something like that. It's a very specific, the recipe I use is from Sorrento. It's hard to find. I have to know where to get ingredients from the South. They're not always available. And like another interesting thing is like pizzelles or cookie. They call them pizzelles in America. They're cookies. They're from Abruzzo. But I've never had them anywhere but that region. No one knows what they are outside of the region. I've even found them in Michigan, in the Midwest. The diversity is across the board, not just pasta, but pasta is pretty important. Dried pasta and fresh pasta, they're both equally adored. They're just the different shapes and the different dishes come from different places. They're all delicious and diverse. The diversity is based on what grain was available, like eggs. This region is wealthy, so they use egg in their pasta. So it's about fresh egg pasta here. And in the South, they grew durum wheat. So it's a water flour dough with durum wheat versus soft wheat, which is what they use here.
It's funny that you mentioned ziti because until you said it, I forgot it. I've only one time I had it was when I was back in Toronto. I think it was like in Olive Garden. That was the only place I've ever had ziti. And I thought, oh, what a cool dish. And I've never had it since. Come to think of it, I don't even remember seeing it in Italy. Even with like lasagna, I don't see lasagna on too many places. I know people make it. You see the pasta sheets in the store, but I don't think I've been to a restaurant that had, because I look for things like that. And I haven't really seen too many restaurants that offer lasagna on the menu.
As far as ziti goes, it's definitely the area you're living because it often goes with the Sunday, well, they call it Sunday gravy in New York or a ragu. That's how my aunt used to serve it with the ragu or baked. But here in Bologna, you don't really see dried pasta very much. I'm surprised you haven't seen, I know they make lasagna at Christmas time in Naples.
They might. I've only seen a couple times on the menu. Maybe we don't go to restaurants that offer that, but I don't know. I thought you would see it like it's a staple, I thought. So I thought you'd see it everywhere, but no, it's not. I love that we can talk about the diversity of Italian food because before coming here, I really thought you come here and you eat pasta. So mostly with like, you would imagine fettuccine alfredo, you eat pasta with tomato sauce and spaghetti with meatballs is the only variety. You don't have the expectation of different types of pasta and how you eat them. Do you eat farfalle or fettuccine or bucatini? Bucatini is another one that I haven't seen too much in restaurants, maybe once or twice. In North America, I think bucatini is a lot bigger. I personally like bucatini, but it's not that popular here, which I expected it to be.
It's in Rome. They use it for bucatini alla matriciana. So that's one of the iconic pasta dishes in Rome. So you definitely see it there. And in Naples, have you had the frittatine napolitana? They're little, it's a street food.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's bucatini usually.
Another way I think pasta is really used in a way that I'm not used to is sort of baked, not just like baked with sauce, but kind of like in a pie. So when they use leftover pasta, it comes out looking almost like a cake. You can slice it.
Yeah, it's like a frittata kind of thing. There are different names for it, but I love that stuff myself. They have wonderful ways of repurposing leftovers. So you'll see it in the north with risotto too. They'll reuse
Really?
leftovers of risotto, and you can crisp it up on the side, and it's oozy on the inside, and it's absolutely delicious. Also in Bologna, the famous tagliatelle al ragù bolognese. You can do that in the pan too, and it gets crispy.
When we were in Sicily, they had another dish that's kind of what you're talking about. It almost seemed like it was, and it was some kind of a long pasta. I'm not sure if it was spaghetti or something else. It's almost like refried.
It's so good when they do that. But better where they're from. If you like the crispy bits on lasagna, you're just making pasta crispy bits, essentially.
But again, I don't think it's something people really think of because you might do it at home. You might just refry your pasta the next day, but you don't think of it in a setting of a restaurant, which I think is interesting. Let's talk about the different dishes that are well known or common in different areas of Italy that most people don't really think of. So we know, for example, Bologna is known for tortellini, Naples is known for pizza. But what else can visitors expect that you think are fantastic options?
Well, there's so much. I could be here forever, but I do have an article about dining tips. Anybody coming here should do their homework because you have to know what's from the area you're visiting. Like everyone thinks of pasta with tomato sauce and pizza, and that's what they want wherever they go. But if you insist on having pizza, then you're going to have to go to some new passionate chef who's trying to make good Neapolitan pizza. Otherwise, it's just going to be run of the mill food and not worth flying across the world to eat. If you're in Venice, for example, eat Venetian food. Don't eat pizza. If you're near St. Mark's Square, you're going to see sandwich wraps under fluorescent lights and bad pizza. Every time I walk by, it just makes me want to crash. They need to do their homework and know what the local foods are. For example, if you're in Bologna, you should be eating tagliatelle al ragù, tortellini in broth, tortellini in brodo, or lasagna made with the ragù bolognese. It's a spinach lasagna with ragù, bechamel sauce, and Parmigiano Reggiano sauce. I have recipes for a lot of these traditional bolognese dishes on my blogs because that's what you want to try. Because when you get tagliatelle al ragù outside of Bologna, it's not good. It's because it's not a real bolognese ragu. And the pizza in Venice, it's not going to be good necessarily. It confuses me that they're not doing a better job of representing their region. If someone from the South is living in Bologna, they open up a restaurant. I don't understand why they're not trying to make it taste as good as they can.
I never really thought of it. I think for Venice in particular, it could be because, it's a touristy place. And sometimes you have tourists coming in, they are not necessarily all as adventurous in food. And sometimes, like you said, sometimes they expect to have pizza. They want to have just regular pasta. And unfortunately, I think many restaurants just cater to that because it's easier.
But the quality of the ingredients is going to be not as good, and the technique is not going to be as good. They're just making money. There's no heart in that. And if you eat the Venetian food, like the cicchetti, little nibbles that you get in Venice, people like to say they're kind of like tapas. That they don't like to hear that, but it's like tapas. Little nibbles. You can go and have a glass of local wine and have some nibbles and move on to the next place. That's my favorite thing to do in Venice.
And I think Venice, for me, when I was there, I had some really good squid ink pasta, which we really have everywhere. But in Venice, it was outstanding. We went to this local restaurant that was a little bit off the main drag. You had to kind of go over a few different canals, and the food was so incredible. I was just like, wow, why would you come to Venice and not come to a place like this? You go to one of those touristy places, grab a sandwich, and then you're like, oh, the food was not that great.
That's actually on my blog too, because I love that dish so much. I have pictures of my daughter over a 10-year span with like black teeth as she eats that food. She eats that dish covered in black squid ink. It's so good though. Even kids will eat it. I mean, she was 4 when she started eating it. So, definitely try to be adventurous because if a 4-year-old's going to eat it.
Another thing that people don't realize is the differences in the food, right? So the north tends to be a bit more meaty. The further south you go, it's less meaty. And I love that you said it goes back to the history of it because, again, north has been traditionally more wealthy. The south has been poor, right? So they work with what's available. And, you also look at Italy and you think, oh, it's just one country, but really it has so many different influences, right? So the north, you have a lot of the Northern Europeans. So it's a bit more mushroomy. It's a bit more meaty. The further down south you go, it's more influenced by the Arabic countries. So you have a lot more citrus. You have a lot more seafood, which again, people I don't think really realize just how different and diverse the north, the south, the middle, everything really is, right?
But it's town by town. It's not even by region or by north and south. Because like in Abruzzo, they love meat. But then it was poor as well. So they're also eating a lot of legumes. It just depends on the economic status too. The dishes are there for everyone now, but their origins might have been, okay, rich people in this region ate this and the poorer people ate vegetables that they were growing with legumes and the local breads. They might have been having whole wheat breads instead of white bread. So it's just, there's so much history. And, I just went on a tour and I'd come back from Slovenia a couple of months ago and got some beeswax candles that looks like the honeycomb. And on the tour, we looked at where they were making candles in the medieval way. And that's, I guess, like a mold. And then they pour the beeswax in and it looks like a honeycomb. But this was a medieval way and new way as in the 1800s. I'm like, okay. So that shows how old the country is. And that's a lot of culinary history. So we've only been unified here since 1861. So it's not really a very old country compared to how long they've been here.
Going back to regional foods, I also want to touch upon Florence because I think that's a place a lot of people go to. And again, I've heard people go, oh, I went to Florence, I had pizza, I had pasta. Now, Florence is known for the steak. I don't eat the steak, but can you tell us a bit more about what that dish is and why it's a must try when you are in Florence?
I mean, if you do like steak, I usually have like 1 or 2 bites, and then my husband and whoever's with us will finish it. But bistec alla fiorentina is definitely very popular. But there's so much more to eat there as well. Like ribollita is a very famous soup.
Yeah.
Made with, it's like a minestrone, but they put bread in it. So there's bread in there. Papa al pomodoro is another soup with tomato and bread. It's tomato bread soup. So there's a lot more to try besides the steak. But it's definitely, if you're not by yourself, worth trying it, but only you don't ask them to have it well done or they'll not do it. Literally won't do it. And then they might snap your head off too because it has to be rare.
I've never had anybody deny me service or say, no, you cannot have this. But I think it's also, I guess, depends on the kind of traveler you are, right? I've seen people in Naples, tourists, and you know how in North America we get a plate and before you start eating your meal, they'll bring you olive oil with the
Right.
vinegar and you dip your bread.
Right.
They don't do it here. We watched 2 people asking the waiter for it. The waiter didn't know what they were talking about. So they're like, no, we want like a plate with bread because, okay. And they're like, no, we want like the side of vinegar and like olive oil. I think they were a bit confused. They brought it and these guys were eating it like they were so happy. But I'm like, again, that's not commonly done here. Let's talk about Bologna because that's your city and it's also a culinary city. It's known for food. So if somebody's coming to Bologna, let's talk about the must-try dishes. We talked a little bit about the tagliatelle al ragu and the tortellini. What makes Bologna such a great food city?
It has that reputation maybe because the ingredients were for the rich, they were more expensive since a lot of people in the poorer areas are eating the legumes and the vegetables and things like that. Maybe there was shame that they couldn't afford the meat and things like that. Because I love the food everywhere and I'll just happily eat a bowl of Italian lentil soup as the tortellini and brodo. But I think the pasta does take skill. For people who don't know, pasta in this area should be rolled out by hand with a rolling pin. So that does lead to a different effect than using it with the machine. That's one thing they're famous for because it has more texture. If you're rolling out your pasta on a piece of wood, that's creating tiny crevices in the pasta that the sauce can hold on to. So there's more texture in the mouth. The sauce will cling to the pasta a bit more. It's also more elastic. If you have more skill making your pasta, then you're going to be kneading the dough with more care. You're going to be creating more elasticity. And then when you roll it out by hand, you're stretching the dough instead of squishing it through a machine. So it's going to be more pliable, more elastic, and more pleasant to eat. If you use the machine without keeping those things in mind, you're just kind of squishing the air out, squishing everything. So it's not going to be as pliable. They take pride in their pasta for sure. And they should definitely try, if they come here, the lasagna with the ragu, as I said, the tortellini and brodo. They also make tortelloni filled with ricotta and Parmigiano cheese, Parmigiano Reggiano cheese. That's delicious. And if they're not on a diet, cotoletta alla bolognese. So it's like a breaded piece of meat with cheese and prosciutto. And it's just a cholesterol bomb of decadence. It's so delicious. I haven't made it at home yet because it's so full of fat and deliciousness that I don't really need to have many portions of that in my house, but it's absolutely delicious. So that's a bolognese style cutlet. Absolutely decadent and amazing. Have it out at a restaurant and it's amazing. Not vegetable heavy on the menus here in Bologna, that's for sure. You'll get grilled vegetables, maybe some boiled vegetables and a salad, and that's usually the extent of the vegetable section. There is a dish called frigione, which is an onion dish. Onions cooked really slowly until they're tender, falling apart in tomato. That's a specific Bologna side dish that you'll see. But other than that, you don't see all the artichokes and beautiful vegetables you see at the market. They're just not on the menus as much unless it's a really extensive menu. Maybe you'll get an artichoke salad and season with shavings of Parmigiano Reggiano cheese or things like that with good oil on top. Mortadella is the other thing.
Yes, that's true. Mortadella comes from that area.
If you've done your homework, you'll know what dishes to eat in the city you're going to because it's never going to taste as good. Even if you have prosciutto di Parma and it's the good stuff, it doesn't taste as good as when you have it in Parma itself. And the mortadella is not going to be as good in Parma as it is in Bologna. If you're food focused and traveling here, throw your ideas of what you're used to in your country and learn about what's done here, because that's also going to be served with more pride and love and passion. And if you're in one of those restaurants where they're just making pizza for tourists, that's just not the same experience. Because if you're eating the traditional food that's been eaten for centuries in one town, then you're also getting a cultural experience as well as a good meal.
I think it's a good point because going back to the idea that, Italy was not a unified country till like the late 1800s. However, the people have been living there for centuries. So they all had their regional, dishes, influences that came from the way where they were located. If somebody comes to Italy, I always say, be more adventurous, try different things, because if you just come here for, the quintessential pasta pizza and that's it, you are going to miss on this whole adventure of culinary taste. For example, I discovered that I love pasta with potato or chickpea, which
so good.
Right?
I love those dishes down where you are.
So for me, having pasta with potato is a foreign concept because it's carb and carb, right? You don't think, how do you mix pasta with potato? Until I've tried it, I was like, wow, that is amazing.
It's so creamy from the potato. It's so delicious.
I thought the taste would be different. I don't know why I thought that, but it's just for some reason, pasta and potato just seem like it would be very bland, right?
No, there are a lot of dishes where you are that they do that, like the pasta patata with prova. Another thing I have on my blog is it's so delicious. And in Liguria, they do pasta with pesto with potato and green beans. So the pesto is already creamy. And if you have that potato with it, it becomes even creamier because you usually add some pasta water to help make it creamy. So it's actually lighter than you would think because they make it fluid. It's not like cubes of hard potato. It kind of creams up with the pasta water as you stir the pasta in with the sauce. It's so good. And then if you're adding cheese on top, like what's not to love?
Yeah, I love the mix of pasta with different non-traditional to us dishes. So for example, the pasta and beans or pasta and chickpeas, pasta and potato. Those are very different combinations that I think we are not used to in North America.
And broccoli, like vegetable sauces. People like I was even with friends when I visited the States and the mom said, "What do you want? Pasta?" And she's like, "Oh, I don't want tomato sauce." I'm like, that's the only option. Like tomato is not the only thing you could put in pasta, because I just made pasta with broccoli the other day, or you can have pasta with cauliflower, pasta with
Zucchini.
zucchini is delicious because that gets creamy too. If you're vegetarian, there are a ton of vegetarian options. So if you're not a vegetarian, you can obviously add pork products to that and make it taste absolutely delicious. If you want to add pancetta or guanciale or ham, things like that with vegetables are really popular.
I think that's why I love living where we are because we do have so many options with vegetables, with seafood. I eat seafood. I don't eat meat. There's so many like pasta with chickpeas, but in Naples we have this stew almost, the pasta fagioli with seafood.
Oh, I love that with the mussels and things like that.
Yes,
So good.
that is amazing.
It is amazing. I love that. I love any pasta, and pasta fagioli is eaten all over the country. If you have it in the Veneto, it's going to be usually like borlotti beans and maybe tagliatelle. That's how I had it in Verona. And in Bologna, it's usually mal tagliati, which means poorly cut. So they're these irregular triangle, square, blob shaped, and it's usually fresh egg pasta also. But then in Abruzzo, one of the recipes in my blog is called sagne e ceci. So that's a different kind of water, flour, fresh pasta with the chickpeas and like rosemary and garlic, and it's absolutely delicious. But then in Naples, I know they usually use dried pasta.
Yeah, so it's again something that varies, depends where you go. And again, going back to this pasta fagioli, it's not something I would have known about in Italy. I mean, it's not something I would have known in Canada because in any Italian restaurant you went to, they didn't have that. So yeah, so that was my first experience with pasta fagioli and all the different flavors. When we were in Matera, we had this.
Oh, yum.
It wasn't pasta, but it was like a fava bean puree. So it's fava bean with potato and garlic. It's pureed with agretti.
Oh, lovely.
They'll saute and then you're just going to pile it on top of that puree. It was delicious.
That sounds great because in Puglia, they have fave e cicoria. So it's the same kind of fave puree, but they use chicory. And I make that at home every winter. So delicious. Wow. That sounds good. And the beans change too in the South. They're usually cannellini beans in the South. So,
yes, they are.
You can have a whole episode of pasta fagioli in the different ways it's made throughout the country because it really is the pasta shape changes. What's in the dough changes.
And that's something I didn't really think about because I just thought it would be the same pasta with beans all over. But now I'm glad you told me this. So I'm going to be on the lookout for pasta fagioli with different beans and different pastas.
And there, of course, and pasta ceci alone, there are 3 million of those too. Sometimes it's in bianco with no tomato. Sometimes it has tomatoes. Sometimes it has anchovy. Sometimes it's onions. Sometimes it's garlic. Sometimes it's both. Like all the little variations that you can obsess over. Because it just depends on the town and what grew there and all that. So yeah, fava beans, dried fava beans, you don't see that much used. They're available everywhere in Bologna, but I've never seen a dried fava bean in my life on a menu here. I think a display of wealth at these restaurants too, like they show the richer dishes, but I like rustic stuff so much. Like, and Abruzzo, you wanted to know some dishes from Abruzzo also?
Yeah, let's talk about Abruzzo because I'm moving to Abruzzo and you also have a place in Abruzzo. So what can people expect in Abruzzo?
The most famous thing, I think, from Abruzzo, besides the pizzellis or pizzelle, those cookies, I don't think people know that it's from that region and you're not going to see them other places that much. Everyone thinks of the pasta that you make in the chitarra, in the guitar. So you roll out a long noodle. That's the most famous thing I'd ever heard of in the States about the region of Abruzzo. They call it either spaghetti alla chitarra, maccheroni alla chitarra, or chitarrine. But actually the most common thing throughout the region are our rosticini, which are lamb skewers. And those are everywhere. Everywhere. In every province, everyone eats a rosticini. And the vibe of eating them, and it's often you eat them, a lot of the places that serve them only have them at dinner time. So it's kind of like even a lot of pizzerias are only open at dinner too. And a lot of arrosticini places have pizza and arrosticini. So it's a very laid back vibe. It's not like a refined high end vibe. It's kind of the same vibe you get at a classic pizzeria. So it's families, everyone's loud, it's fun and boisterous. And And the bread in Abruzzo is delicious. So, like Bologna has amazing fresh pasta. The bread is just not it for me because I like rustic Southern Italian breads. The breads in the north can be more delicate and refined. I'm like, that's just not bread. And you talk to anybody from the south, they're like, yeah, they don't know how to make bread here. So I probably shouldn't say that out loud. They'll kill me. But yeah, so the bread is amazing. So the oil is also amazing. So you can like have the rossicini, maybe put it on top of the bread as you're eating. And then all the meat juices go into the bread and it's like delicious.
Would the arancini be more of a snack or a dish?
No, the meal. You can get a vegetable, maybe a couple of appetizers. They often eat bruschetta for an appetizer, and that might be covered with vegetables or a local sausage. The arrosticini are the main course. You could also get maybe a pizza and some arrosticini or share with people at the table. Not all the places serve pizza there, but pitara pasta is amazing. Teramo in particular has really amazing food. They have a dish that does have little meatballs with pasta, but they're the size of a chickpea with a sauce that's been cooked for a few hours. It's a meat sauce. I make it, and it's on my blog too. I make it with lamb, pork, and beef. It's a slow cooked ragu, and then you get these teeny little meatballs, and it's the most delicious dish. There's a lot of good food there, a lot of good ingredients. They grow a lot there. So they grow lentils, they grow chickpeas. The meat is outstanding. And then if you're on the coast, you get seafood.
Yeah.
So if you're on the coast of Abruzzo, you could go to a place called a Trabocco. Have you seen those?
Yes.
They're super cool. They have them in Asia. Yeah, because I've posted about them on Instagram. I've had people in Asia write to me saying we have similar contraptions because it's not a boat, it's like a net.
So for the listeners who are not familiar, it used to be used for fishing, right? So think of like a fishing hut on a platform that extends into the water. When they didn't have the boat, they could go on the pier to the end of it and fish. It was a way to allow people to get food that didn't necessarily have a boat. So today, most of them have been transformed into restaurants, right? So
that's a great experience if you want good seafood from the area. Definitely.
Yeah. So you would go, I think there's set menu usually, you would have delicious food. And I guess there's so many of them along the coast, which again is an experience to really enjoy when you are in Abruzzo.
And every area that's on the water in Italy has a different kind of a fish stew. Where you are, they call it zuppa di pesce, right? But in Pescara and in that area, they call it brodetto di pesce. So I even have a cookbook that is called Brodetto. It's about all the different kinds of seafood stews and other names on each coast. There's a different name for everything everywhere just to confuse us all, but they have, what seasonings they had. So some are going to be with tomatoes, some without, some have different kinds of fish, but they all have different names.
Okay. So now we've given people the idea of the different flavors, the different dishes. If somebody is feeling overwhelmed and they don't know where to start, because I mean, you're trying to come for vacation, you're not going to try to learn the whole history of Italian food.
Right.
We are lucky because we live here and we can experience different flavors. What are some of the immersive experiences that we can recommend to people to try out? I think cooking classes are a good start.
Cooking classes and tours. You can do, week-long tours. You can do 3-day tours. You can do 3-hour tours. So if you don't want to do the homework, there are books you can take out on the library that go into regional foods, even cookbooks. If you look at regional cookbooks at a library, you can find out what some of the local dishes are. If you don't want to do any of the work, you could go on a tour and have a local take you around and tell you what to try. That way you'll get taken to places that are not that popular, but locals know about. So you also will get treated better because if you don't speak the language, I know some people think that service is not attentive enough. You don't have to worry about how you're being treated in that way as much.
I love the food tours idea. It's not something that I always participated in, but having been on a couple, I think they really are great. Let's talk about the different types of food tours. The one you and I went to was like a, half a day food tour. Then there's ones that are like a day things. But you recently went on a multi-day food tour. And I think that sounds like an incredible experience.
It was. And I, like you, have never really done tours. So in the 10 years, I'd only done one. I'm an independent traveler. I do the research
Yeah.
and I obsess over it. I look at YouTube videos, I read articles. I don't need the help, but I didn't really know the value. Now that we took those tours together where we met, I learned a lot, even though I already knew so much the food that I was eating. You still are going to hear tidbits from locals, and that's something you can't necessarily read in a book. People aren't going to publish these little bits of information. So you can learn a lot and have fun and have someone who speaks the language help you out. So they definitely have value. And this longer tour that I just did was outstanding. I always thought they were too expensive. I didn't understand the value of them. And now I get it because they're coordinating everything. Plus a driver. You can go to a winery without having to have a designated driver. You can have somebody book all of the restaurants, all of the lodging, maybe get tour guides through a variety of sites, have walking tours, learn about products that have been made for centuries. We went to a place that's been making this kind of liquor since 1604, and they opened up this workshop just for us. So it's those special, unique experiences that changed my mind about the value of a tour.
Yeah. So I think if you're really into food and you want to combine the winery tour, the tastings, and you don't want to do it all yourself, that sounds like a great option for somebody to take a multi-day tour and, get into those experiences, learn about the history behind the food, but also, like you said, get taken from place to place. So you don't have to worry about making reservations. You don't have to worry about what do I order? What food do I get? What wine do I pair with it? Which I think is fantastic.
And the wine was exceptionally interesting to learn about. We were doing natural wines and we were drinking so much wine on this tour with lunch and dinner. I'd never really had it that much. No headaches. No feeling like I had had too much and need to have an Advil before I go to bed. But that was an education. I've been living here for 10 years. I've had wine, but there's always something to learn. I think for an experienced traveler and an inexperienced traveler, they can get a lot out of it. Plus meeting people. Maybe you're a single woman and you don't want to be eating at a restaurant by yourself. You'll have inbuilt companions for a few days. So that was really very nice.
If you're just starting to get into the food, you might want to enrich your Italian experience. We mentioned cooking classes are a good option. But another place that most people don't necessarily think of is the local food markets. Now, we have some really good ones here. I know you have one in Bologna because I've been to that one. What do you think is the appeal, or what do you think those markets offer that can teach someone about food?
Well, the diversity of ingredients. For one thing, there's so many more types of vegetables available. I mean, more and more has become available in the States. But I remember being a kid, there was like what, golden apple, Granny Smith, and red apple. And that was it. The repertoire has expanded quite a bit in the States. But I still think they have, maybe if it's not more, maybe that's another way to say it, different. You can learn about things that they've been growing for centuries here that aren't available, and the markets aren't just going to be produce. They're usually going to be butchers and cheesemongers and wine shops and bread. So it's just kind of an opportunity to look into a different culture, what they're shopping, what they're buying, what they're eating. And a lot of times nowadays markets have eateries as well. So you can maybe eat a cheaper meal eating at the market.
Yeah, I think that's a good option too. If you're trying to try the local flavors, having a little snack or sampler will give you an idea if you actually enjoyed the meal or not.
Yeah. In Bologna, you can also go to pasta shops.
Mm-hmm.
So because you're supposed to be rolling pasta by hand here, but not everybody does it. Not everybody has integrity or the time, depending on their operation. So if you go to a pasta shop in this region, you'll know it's handmade, hand rolled, and you'll be getting the right thing. And that's a lot cheaper too, actually. So if you don't mind eating on a stairwell somewhere, you can buy some tortellini and brodo to go or lasagna to go and eat it on a bench somewhere in a park.
Let's talk about tips for going to restaurants and dining out. I think it's a bit of a different approach than it is in North America. And I think a lot of people might have a hard time with it, or there'll be a misunderstanding because they don't understand how the Italian culture approaches food.
It's a source of frustration for me when I read reviews and they give negative reviews based on what's a standard here. It's just different than what we have. So they think they're being treated differently because there are tourists. But basically, if you see an empty restaurant and try to get in and they say they're full, even though it's empty, they might have all every table covered for that night with reservations. So don't always assume just because it's empty that they don't actually have reservations. It's a lot slower. A meal is a lot slower in Italy. You could be there for like 4 hours if you want to. Sometimes they're not going to kick you out and rush you in the same way they do in the States. Also, expect different service. They don't come every 3 minutes to check in on you. They're going to take your order. They're going to ask if you need anything, if they're clearing plates or something like that, but they're not going to be stopping at the table as frequently. So it's not negligence. It's just they want to leave you alone to chat and enjoy your food. They don't intrude as much. In America, I feel like they check on you a lot more. I don't know if it's the same in Canada, but they're much more cheerful and friendly. It's just a different vibe. They're giving you good service. They're giving you what you need, but flagging somebody down doesn't mean they're being negligent. They're just leaving you in peace. So it's a different situation.
It's similar in Canada. I think, when it comes to customer service, we have a different understanding of what that is. But in North America, customer service would be them coming in, checking everything okay, everything fine. Would you like something else? In Italy, customer service means they let you enjoy your meal. They don't rush you, like you said. They don't bug you all the time. They let you enjoy the food as they would enjoy it. I also noticed that you have to ask for the bill here. They're not just automatically bring it to you.
Yeah. I went to visit my mom last year and I was in shock because the whole meal from entry to leaving was 45 minutes. It was so fast. Like within a minute, she's like taking our order. The food was out within 5 minutes. They're whipping our plates out from under us and handing us the check. It was just so fast. So we barely got to talk. Like it was jolting compared to how slow it is here. Yeah. So don't expect them to bring you the check, definitely, because you're going to have to ask for it or even go up to the front.
Yeah. And I think Italians also eat a lot more. I don't know how you feel about that, but I'm amazed at how much food they can get through at a dinner, which explains why they are sitting there for so long. Because they'll have like a first, a second appetizer, dessert, or the aperitif. And it's just like there's so much food being consumed that I sometimes feel like I'm rushing through just having like my appetizer and like my main meal because I just cannot fit anymore in my stomach. And these people are just taking their time and eating their way through the whole menu.
When I go out with Italians, they're not eating that much. If it's a special occasion, then they'll be the whole sequence. But even if it's just a couple of things, they're taking their time, they're having their wine, they're talking. It's much less fast paced. In America, a lot of times people are looking at their watch the whole time, moving like sometimes they'll schedule several things for one evening. So they're just rushing from one thing to the next. So it's a totally different experience. Just relax, enjoy the food and wine. Wine with lunch is not abnormal either. It it doesn't mean alcoholism. It just means wine is what is, good paired with the food. So don't be surprised.
I think a lot of people might be surprised that in Italy, they don't give you a glass of water. So when you sit down and you ask for water, the water culture is very different here. It's like part of your experience to get a bowl of water, and you have a choice between flat water and fizzy water. I don't think it's something that we're used to. We're just used to getting more of like, I have a glass of water, like tap water. They don't do tap water here.
You have to ask for it specifically. Sometimes people think they're being gypped, that they have to pay for the water too. So it's just, it's good to have a little bit knowledge about what to expect at the meal because it's definitely different. Now that I'm used to this, like the flow, like as I said, I was so jolted by that quick meal. I'm like, what is the rush? It was so fast. You get used to being able to relax and talk to people.
So what are your tips for trying to differentiate between the tourist trap restaurant and the authentic restaurant that you can enjoy? And I know in the past, a lot of things was like, well, if your menu is in English, that's definitely a no. But I think things are changing now. So I wouldn't call that necessarily a tourist trap, especially in touristy areas. What is your tip for how to differentiate between don't go here because it's a tourist trap and go here because it's very authentic?
You can, if you have done that homework that I keep saying you need to do. If you look at the menu and it has only local dishes on it, if you see a menu that, you're in Venice and you see carbonara, which is from Rome, and pizza, which is from Naples, and spaghetti with bolognese, which doesn't exist in Italy. That's a London thing, an England thing. It's tagliatelle with ragu. If you see Italy's greatest hits on one menu and it has nothing to do with the location, then that's definitely, I think, one way. But there are, I mean, if you are in a place that's got like, 5 or 6 different flags on it and it's translated into 6 different languages, and that's definitely not a local joint either. But they definitely have started translating more into English in a lot of the restaurants, at least in Bologna. If it's a touristy place, you can see why they would do it.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But definitely what they're serving shows a lot too. Also, if it's crowded, go to the place that's crowded because that generally means the food's going to be. If it's like completely empty and also another tip is don't expect to eat at 5 o'clock. You're going to have to get an aperitif or something because if it's open, it's more touristy as well.
So another point I think I forgot to mention earlier. So Italians tend to have, to finish their meal, they'll have like an espresso. They'll have like amaro, something to digest. In North America, we would easily have like, I'll have a cappuccino after my meal. That's not done here.
No, I mean, sometimes I see Italians talking about these dogmatic rules that they don't even know about. You can't have a cappuccino after a blah, blah, blah o'clock, and a lot of that is somewhat true. But if it's still 11 o'clock and they haven't had much for breakfast, you can still have a cappuccino at noon. They don't like the heavy milk drinks after a meal. So cappuccino is just not an after dinner thing, but a black espresso, black coffee, absolutely.
It amazes me how much they can drink of that through the day, which is just mind blowing. My stomach cannot handle all that espresso, that strong cup.
I love the coffee where you are in Naples. To me, that's the best coffee in the country. So like I would have a hard time sticking to my 2 a day. When I'm there, I have like 4 a day until my stomach starts saying stop doing that. But I can't, it can't resist Neapolitan coffee.
So now let's talk about those amaros and those digestives. It's very common after you finish your meal, especially in the evening, for the waiter to come over and say, would you like amaro or something else? I think a lot of people might also perceive that as trying to get ripped off, but that's just part of the culture here. They're not trying to sell you stuff. That's just part of their culture.
And a lot of times those things are going to be on the house anyway. I would say more than not, it's on the house. I actually went out to lunch today and they gave us this homemade pistachio cream liqueur, which was absolutely delicious, but they didn't charge us for that. So after your coffee, it's totally common to give an amaro. One thing that people should know is a lot of them are very bitter because they're made out of roots and different weird things. Once you develop a taste for them, you love them, but they might be completely unappealing to an American palate at the beginning. If you can't take a spritz, if that's too bitter for you, then definitely don't go for an amaro. Just have an limoncello or something. But they supposedly do help with digestion, so why not?
I think the last thing I'm going to mention about eating out is about modifying your dishes. In North America, we're so used to saying, can I have this, but change this for that? They don't really do substitutions here. So don't expect to go to a restaurant and say, I don't want my spaghetti, I want tagliatelle or something else. I think they modify it to a point, but it's not the same approach as in North America.
No, definitely. I think if you have a child, like if my daughter wants cacio e pepe, she doesn't like the pepper, so it's cheese and pepper. She wants the pepper not in there. Sometimes they'll do something like that for her, but not always. Carbonara has a lot of pepper. Sometimes we say don't put the pepper, or spaghetti with clams, don't put the parsley or something like that. But that's about like a quick, easy omission like that is fine. Sometimes even if it's a child, you can ask for a half portion. They used to do that for our daughter, but not all of them. They can do simple modifications like that. Thankfully, there aren't really kid menus here because Italian food is incredibly kid friendly. So there aren't really like the whole chicken nugget, grilled cheese kind of specific kid menu that's all the same throughout America. Like they don't really have kid menus. So that's another thing people should be.
I think the kid menu for them is just pasta with butter or simple sauce.
Yeah, or a pasta with tomato sauce, but most kids love that. So it's pretty easy to feed a kid.
You know what? We were at Asian restaurant the other day. We went out and the family came over and they had a child. They ordered themselves sushi and all that good stuff. But for the kid, they ordered a pasta with cream sauce. It's a white sauce, probably butter or simple cheese sauce. Even in an Asian restaurant, the kid got a special just plain pasta with the cheese sauce and the parent enjoyed their own different food. So it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, you can do simple things like that. Try to go with it as best as you can because it's such delicious food. Try it, try new things like and Oregon meats and things like that that aren't as served in the States. Try those things. You might end up liking tripe. Who knows? My husband loves tripe now. In Florence, they eat lampredotto, which is part of the stomach. I think I can't even remember what part it is. Try these things. If you're brave, you might end up finding that they're absolutely delicious. Sweetbreads, all those kinds of things, because they're used a lot here. They really use the whole animal. At the butcher, you can get all of those cuts too. It's not like you're just getting the prime cuts at a butcher here. They use it all.
To summarize, what are some of the biggest takeaways you have for the listeners or any other advice that we didn't touch upon?
Yeah. Well, basically, don't think that fresh pasta is better than dried pasta. They're two different things. So if you're in a region that traditionally serves dried pasta, enjoy it. Like Naples. Naples has some fresh pasta as well in that area, but like that, they use more dried pasta, like Genovese. I'm sure you've had that in your area, that Genovese sauce with beef and onions and everything. You haven't had it? Oh,
Well, no, I don't eat beef, right?
oh, of course. Of course. You've had all the seafood dishes that are so amazing down there. The pizza. Again, try to stick with the local specialties. And if you do find you're in the north and you really want pizza, it's obviously popular throughout the whole country. Just try to look up where the good ones are and see if it's what they would call like pizza gourmet, like a gourmet pizza, or if it's Neapolitan. There are different kinds of pizza too. You get the rectangular pieces that you can go into a pizza shop and cut it off into pieces and just eat it as a street food kind of thing. So just at least try to source the places. Also, if it's a popular place, obviously try to book
Ahead of time.
keep in mind that a lot of places don't open until 7:30 or even 8 or 8:30. So you're definitely going to need to have a snack in between, have your spritz and some nibbles in between, or you're going to starve. You'll get used to eating later. Just keep in mind if the places are open all day that they're probably catering to tourists. Not all of them are bad though. So if you end up starving and you have to go to one of those places, try to look up some reviews on the fly and see if they're good, because it doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad.
That's a very good point because here you get a little treat with your aperitif. So it's always good to nibble on some olives or crackers or whatever they give you. And they're quite good sometimes, those sandwiches. And
Yeah, if you can source out where to get a good fettuccine, you can actually just have dinner that way, have a spritz, and you can get some really good food, more than just little pizzetta and chips and olives, but you can get some really good stuff sometimes, depending on where you're going. So that can be a really fun way to end the day too. And yeah, just try to be adventurous, be open-minded. And I have resources in that article I told you that I wrote about dining tips, so they can get ideas about where to look. A lot of bloggers have recipes and travel articles. I mainly have recipes. I have a couple of travel articles so that you can get lists of what to try in certain cities, things like that. The work, the work has definitely just been done already. You just have to find it.
well, Tina, it was great having you. I will link in the show notes to some of your posts about the recipes, the tips for dining out, and your website in general. Tell the listeners where they can find you and reach out to you if they want to.
On Instagram, my handle is Tina's Table Italy, and my blog is www.tinastable.com. And I'm on Facebook too, but if you go to the site, you'll get all the links to social media. Twitter, I've abandoned, or X or whatever I'm supposed to call it these days. It's not a big food blogging platform, so don't bother there. I'm on Instagram more than I've been posting lately on my blog.
Well, thank you so much, Tina. It was great chatting with you.
Thank you for having me.
This conversation has made me very hungry. I think I'm going to go and get something to eat now.
Sounds good.
Have yourself a good one.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.